Welcome to Inspiring Life with Elizabeth. I am Elizabeth Browning. I'm your host. This is a show meant to inspire you and uplift you and support you in stepping into a life that you will love and that you will be able to celebrate. And I'm going to be interviewing experts from all different fields, people who are experts in the field of health, in the field of the power of creativity, in transformation, personal transformation, and so much more. And I'm so excited because this is our inaugural launch into living the life of our dreams. So with no further ado, I want to introduce to you our fabulous first guest. This is Lois Barth. Lois Barth is a human development expert, a speaker, a life and business coach, and author to the wonderful book, Courage to Sparkle, The Audacious Girl's Guide to Creating a Life That Lights You Up. Lois supports women to shatter their inner and outer glass ceiling by championing them to overcome their negative self-talk, manage stress, and advocate for themselves and other women. And she calls her brand female-focused, male-friendly. She believes strongly that when you support people to shine bright, share their gifts, and make a difference, that's the heart of her Courage to Sparkle message and brand. She is the creator of Smart Sexy TV that you can see on YouTube. She's been the makeover life coach for Self Magazine, Fitness Magazine. She is a sought after expert. She's been quoted and published in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Fast Company, Self Magazine, and that's just to name a few. And her speaking clients include L'Oreal, Women in Banking, Capital One, Women in Trucking, Mid-Atlantic Women in Energy, Society of Women Engineers, and the American Heart Association, to name a few. And most wonderful, Lois is my dear friend and someone I trust totally. So I'm so happy to introduce to you Lois Barth, who is bringing to us today the topic, Truth Serum. So yay, welcome Lois. Since we're online, we'll do the online applause, a thunderous round of applause. And Lois, to kick us off, why don't you tell us how you came up with the idea of Truth Serum? Where did that come from?
Well, thanks so much for inviting me on the show for the launch. I'm so honored. You're my sparkle sister. Woohoo! Sister from a different mister. So anyway, I'm really honored to be part of the launch of this amazing initiative. And I love metaphors. It's just the way my mind is sort of like a Maytag washing machine that never quite goes to spin dry. And one of the things I love are metaphors because they're wonderful teaching tools and they're very creative. And so I know that of many, many things and gifts and businesses and passions that you have, Elizabeth, you have your own Arbonne business. And I think a lot about innovation in beauty and beauty lines. And I think in terms of, I was thinking about serums. So serums is often an item in the anti-aging ammunition, if you will. And serums are really dense and thick and rich, and a little goes a long way. And so I thought that's a lot like truth, right? That when we really distill our truth and live it, it's rich, it's sustainable. And if we continue using it, boy, we see seismic differences in our own lives and others. And so that's how I came to it. And I love the expression, I made up one of my Loisisms, which stand for lessons, opportunities, insights, and solutions. And then I found out that my little one, Gloria Steinem, had a different version of it 20 years before. So I felt so honored. But basically, I say the truth sets you free, but it pisses you off in the meantime. And so true. But it sets us free if we're willing to go through the discomfort of really embracing what that truth is for ourselves and others. And so I thought, what a rich way to launch this conversation around well-being, which is our Truth Serum. And it's a topic of great fascination for me. And I'll talk more about this course that I am creating around this topic of truth. So that's how I got into it.
So let me ask a question, because as soon as I think of saying, okay, I'm going to stand in my truth, I'm going to speak my truth, can you address the difference between standing in your truth, speaking your truth, and people who get confused with that and say, that's it, I'm going next door and telling my neighbor off, then I'm calling my sister and telling her I'm never speaking to her again? Because a lot of people think that they don't tell the truth because when they do, it's not going to be pretty. And there's a lot of confusion around that. Can you address that to begin with? Like, is there a difference?
A huge difference. A difference is big and wide as the Grand Canyon difference. One creates living in your truth, authenticity, and the other one leaves a wake of bodies. And we don't want that. That is not what we want. We want the truth to set not only ourselves free, but other people as well. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because I get really, I love words. Words to me are like tasty morsels with no calories. And I often feel like a lot of words get thrown around. And one of the words that get thrown around a lot is authenticity and living your truth. And they usually use that as a pass for bad behavior. So I'm really, really glad that you're talking about that. No, they're totally different. I'm really about what I call being not brutally honest, because that's just like, excuse me, I'm going to vomit my upset on you and we're going to call it honesty. No,
Yeah.
It's different than being beautifully honest. And I do believe the two peacefully coexist, that you could really be honest with yourself and others, and you could still deliver that in a gracious, thoughtful, respectful way. Because as we know, when we just share our anger or our truth coming from a place of vitriolic, the person only hears the rage and they shut down. So again, living your truth is about really, it's a refinery process. I feel like it's a real refinement process. One of the things that I'm hearing you say, Elizabeth, is people often use truth to basically vent their anger. Mm-hmm. And I think anger is such a misunderstood emotion. Most people, especially women, are scared of it. And it's not, it can be an incredibly useful tool. And part of living our truth is honoring what we feel, what it's guiding to us in terms of core values, and then what do we need and want, and then how do we communicate that to someone else? Because
and the sludge, I love this nut sludge analogy. I think you talked to me about that in terms of gasoline. Can you elaborate on that? Like,
absolutely,
because that crystallized it for me.
It's a refinery process, right? So if you go and get petrol out of the ground, it's brown sludge. You put it in your car engine, not much is going to happen. In fact, you're going to be stuck and stalled out. It's the same thing with living our truth or the anger piece, right? If all you do is take that and just, put it in someone else's tank, we know how far that will get you.
Throw sludge on somebody else.
Exactly. Oh, I'm living my truth. Woohoo, yay me. Yeah, not. But if we allow ourselves our own truth, and if anger should emerge out of that, and anger does lead us to our truth in a way like no other feeling does. I really feel that way. And we allow ourselves to go through a refinery process, very much like petrol coming out of the ground and then moving it to a tank and an engine. It actually gets us to our destination. We can put our foot on the proverbial gas pedal and move us forward to what is our truth, respectful communication. And I'm in this process of really distilling what is that refinery process. I actually am one of the few people that actually feels like anger gets a really bad name. Mm-hmm. And I think that it is such a powerful, evocative emotion that if we use it well, can guide us and to not only transform our own life, but the world around us. So that's what I really feel like living our truth is, and speaking to the anger piece, because that's really up for me. For me, when I turned 50, my bullshit meter broke. Okay, it broke. I didn't want it back. I am a recovering good girl, and it was killing me on all levels. And so what changed for me is I had no toleration for BS. My fuse became like from 3,000 miles wide to like, yeah. And what had to change was how I expressed my lack of toleration for BS, not the lack. I didn't have to settle, but how I express. I had to really learn how to finesse it, so that's one thing.
I think for so many of us too, it's like, what I find is I have an exercise, I'm a transformational acting coach.
Yes, I
On many
know.
other things. And I have an exercise when people are upset, and you put somebody against the wall in a safe space where no one really hears, and you just let it rip, and you express everything that you need to say. And then when you're done and the energy's been released, then you go back and go, okay, what's really true about that I need to communicate skillfully? And I think that is so much the difference. I had someone who was really angry with me the other day and blasted me. And I went into one of those paralysis modes. And this person very skillfully contacted me later and said, here's what's really true. Here's what really happened. It wasn't about you. I just had this happen. I just had that happen. I'm really sorry that I took that out on you. So when we say, well, I'm going to tell someone my truth, we need to really, I think, manage our system before we even know what the real truth is. And that's exciting, because then we don't have to be afraid. I grew up in Texas being a really good girl. And so if you were mad, you just put on a smile and pretended nothing was wrong, and then went home and ate ice cream or did whatever. And so it's this fine line, isn't it, of beginning to say, what is my truth? How do I honor it? And also work skillfully in terms of sharing that. So I love that you're looking at that, because anger is scary. As an acting coach, anger is scary for women, and crying is scary for men. And for us to be able to give each other permission to be both, I think, is sort of a new frontier.
It's so true. In my first coaching certification, I ask my clients, what's the hardest feeling? What's the easiest feeling? And across the board, women say the hardest feeling is anger and their easiest feeling is sadness. And for men, it's a total reverse.
Yeah.
So it's very true. And I have actually used before I came into your work. I mean, obviously your work totally transformed my life on so many different levels. I used to do an exercise called targeting. I learned from my other acting teacher, where you just target the person and you talk to them. And what I really got out of your work is the imaginary monologue took it to a whole other level. And when I work with my clients, always giving you credit, by the way, because that's the way I roll, is that I said, I want you to be so unmanicured. I want behind closed doors. I want no, nice girl stuff. And it's incredibly confronting for my clients when they do it, but then they get downright giddy. And it's so amazing how the energy goes up. They're like, ah, woo, woohoo, like all of a sudden this childlike energy, because we spend so much energy suppressing our truth. And that's connected very much with longevity and people who are vital. They're sad. I mean, God bless, look at Betty White. Yes, her bones are in a different space, 99 years old, but she's still sassy. She lives her truth. She speaks her, it's an aliveness. And it is really a refinery process. And the first step for me is name it to claim it. So when you're dealing with anger, you have to call it anger. And I see for myself, and I teach this stuff. When I get angry, the first thing I do, my little Virgo goes, well, I don't know if you're really angry. Maybe you're sad. Maybe you're angry. Maybe, it's like my little jurors. Well, should you really have a right to be angry? Because, really they're doing the best they can. And it's so exhausting if I could just say, I'm angry. What is wrong with it? And then allowing, name it to claim it, feel it. And that is sometimes I have to say, that's the most terrifying. And I think it's the most terrifying is we're not used to being in our full energy. Because when I'm angry, I'm like, rah, and I have so much energy. And I think that we spend so much of our time pushing it down, like what's going to happen. And what I work with my clients and what I'm working with myself is to get rid of the story of why we're angry right now. Just let that energy surge through our body. It's energy, it's life force.
Mm-hmm.
And then I love your work about targeting, basically the imaginary monologue, and then coming back to going to the next layer. And to me, that's again the refinery process, because I always think anger and living our truth is like what I call an emotional lasagna. There's lots of layers, right? Anger is never usually just anger. It's sadness, it's hurt, it's betrayal. And for us to tease it out and then to look at the layer and say, there's hurt here, and which one is historical, which creates hysteria. Historical is hysterical. And then which one is a real need that has to be addressed? And if it sounds complicated and hard work, you're right, it is. But the payoff is we get to live our truth and we get to communicate powerfully to another human being.
So Lo, you talk about living your truth and speaking your truth and
Right.
sharing your truth. And beyond anger, there's so many forms of truth that we're still waiting. The artist self who was too afraid to bring forth their writing, or, the cook who never thought she would be really good in the kitchen because she couldn't measure up to her mother, or the tango dancer at 75 who says, oh, I couldn't possibly start that now. Why do you think it's hard for us to step into our truths at every level? And is there something that we could begin to do, especially for those at the magic golden stage of our lives after 50, where a lot of us, I know I can speak for myself, feel like we're really just ready to begin.
Totally.
Like I've lived this amazing life and now I'm ready to begin to do all the stuff that I've waited to do. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's really great. There was an article in Times Magazine when Time was actually in print, and it was called Midlife Celebration. And it was the best opening line I had ever read in an article. And it said, midlife, a man gets a red Corvette and a bad toupee. A woman quits her job and scales the Andes. And I just thought it was one of the most brilliant lines. And it's not to say that men don't do other things, and not to get into a whole gender conversation, but we have this energy that starts coming up, this resurgence, whether it's, the kids are out of the house, or, the kids are launching, God willing, or whatever it is, or more testosterone, less estrogen, who cares? But it is this resurgence of, hey, get real. I have more history than future. What do I want to do with it? And I would say the first step, what stops us, to answer your question, is fear. And what will people think? What if it doesn't work out? There's a gender piece, there's an ethnic piece, there's a cultural, there's agreements that we make in our life with people. Oh, I don't like seeing you this way. Well, this is who I am. So all of these overlays really push us down. And so it takes a supreme act of courage. And courage is from the French root core of the heart. We don't move forward towards our goals and our dreams in the absence of our fear, but right alongside it. So I think that's the thing that stops us. And the most important thing to just get back on that track is to start to be gentle. And if the concept of living your truth, if you feel like, oh my gosh, my whole life is a lie, or I've been phoning in my representative, it's overwhelming to think about, where do I begin? But how can I start small? How can I be consistent, aligned, and sustainable actions? And how do I take it to the next level? And I think it's in little steps. It's a simple act of somebody says something and you used to just either nod or not say anything, and to smile and go, I actually disagree. And I'm going to agree to disagree. Like that's huge, like your heart is going, and that's like a huge victory. And what we, especially as women, and men too, but as women, we have this incredible, brilliant truth teller called our body. And when we get energized and we're like on the crest of the wave, we're like, That's a sign we're terrified, but we're energized. And that's a sign like, oh, wait, there's an opportunity to tell truth in my life. And I would say looking at what gives us joy and is the first steps to doing that. I mean, I'll just tell a very, very brief story. I was doing a program for a group, and you really helped me a lot with it, which is I actually love the pig on the Geico commercial. I love that pig. And even before that pig existed, I just would go around the house out of nowhere and go, wee, whoops, wee. And I noticed how open my body felt. And I went, can I possibly do that? And I'm a pretty ballsy lady to begin with. And I'm like, can I really do that on a presentation, a virtual presentation? And people hardly know. Of course, I created a context. And I didn't just go, everybody, wee! But I created a context about allowing ourselves to feel more joy. And people said it was the most favorite part of their program. And it's like, when we don't trust ourselves, we're actually depriving other people. So anyway, those are some thoughts about it.
I love that. I love that. So for those of us who are ready to live our truth at a whole different level and step into a new beginning, whatever that means, it could be in any area of our life, it could be at any stage of our life. Are there like 3 magic, I don't know, exercises or tricks or things that we could do that would start to breathe a little energy and juice and life into the life we're living? Because I love this idea, and I do. It's like the truth will set you free, and it might piss you off, and
Exactly.
it's worth being pissed off over when you start to really be who you are.
Well,
Especially if you've waited a long time to be who you really are.
And especially in COVID, I think the lesson for all of us is how precarious, tenuous, and brief life is. We've got a front row seat to see that it is so much more of a risk not to risk, and to stretch, don't break. So I have 3 mantras I love to live by, which is you can't boss around the heart, the body doesn't lie, and you can't not know what you know. So those are my mantras that I really do my best. But in terms, I would say the first thing is writing a list of, if I wasn't afraid, what would be the top 10 things either I would be, do, or have.
Yeah.
If I wasn't afraid, if I didn't care what people thought, if I could not fail, like any way that starts to create spaciousness, you know, and I know it may sound like a morbid exercise, but a legacy exercise is, what do you want people to say about you at the end of your life? Do you want them to tell that you were incredibly courageous, that you loved in ways that you didn't ever see from other people? I think if you can just start to give yourself prompts to open up the spaciousness. Some people, it's going to be worrying about what people think. So if I didn't worry about what people would think, I would do. Some people, it's failure. If I couldn't fail, you know, and I think what I would want people to say about me at the end of my life. I think those just keep opening up. And I think just the last thing is, when you hear the itty bitty committee yammering around, you know, those little scrappy self-talk, to just stop and breathe and say, says who? Or I like to go, says who, baby? Like, excuse me, but who made that up? And I do not have to buy into it, because I like to get a little sassy, Sasha Fierce. But to just start to say, says who? How do you know that's even true? And so those are the ways that I like to start moving more into my truth. Do those resonate for you, by the way?
Oh my goodness. They resonate. They resonate totally and completely. And I'm so grateful. And I hope that we all take a moment after this and start to make our lists, because if we weren't afraid, if we didn't care what anyone thought, if it was our time, which I think it is our time, what might we do? And there are infinite possibilities out there. So
Absolutely.
Lois, you always inspire me. It is such a gift to be
Ditto,
on
kiddo, darling.
this journey with you. Thank you. If anyone has questions for Lois or would like to get more information, her website is Lois Barth, LoisBarth.com. And she is beyond generous in spirit and would be happy to address any questions or thoughts that came up today. So thank you. Thank you, everyone. That concludes
Yay, launch. Yay, launch.
Woo! We did it. We've taken flight. That's right.
Thank you so
all
much.
All right, everybody. I love you all. Have a glorious day. Bye-bye.
You all the best.